Howdy, folks. I'm Nim Jickles. This is the Ain't That a Bitch podcast, episode 21. Remember when 21 was the haha funny, like meme number and all that? Good stuff. Good times. When was that? I've lost all sense of like my meme timeline. I can't remember what years things started. I feel like the only year I remember existing is 2016.
It's 2014, I guess, was the Vine.
That was in the Vine. Oh, I'm so old. 6 years ago was when... What? You're shitting me. No. 21 was a thing 6 years ago? Holy shit. I don't believe that. Man, I was saying it as a total throwaway remark. Jesus Christ. All I can remember is the only year I remember is 2016. Donald Trump got elected president. Harambe died. I feel like that's that year, and now this year, and the end of 2019 transitioning into 2020. Those are like the years that will be remembered. Assuming humanity survives for another 50 years, when people are like talking about the 2000s or talking about like the 2010s, as a decade, they'll be referring to 2016 and 2019-20. Again, Harambe, Trump, Vine dying. When was that? It was 2017 when Vine closed? I think I was in 7th grade. Well, but then obviously... Oh, Jesus, the world falling apart. Before that, Area 51 raid, Notre Dame burnt down, Australia burnt down, the Amazon burnt down.
Vine died 2016.
Also 2016. Insanity. Yeah, I would have been in 6th grade for, half of that year. I guess the front. What half of the year I'm in? It's very easy to remember because the ones digit of the year is the grade that I'm in for that. But what the fuck half of it? I don't remember. It was... So this year, last year I was 10th grade, and it's 2020 now. So the back half. So the back half of 2016. What the fuck am I talking about? The front half of 2016 would have been the end of 6th grade. That's what it is. Okay. Anyways, I don't know. That had nothing to do with anything. Actually, what I wanted to come on and say is, so I've been meaning to say this for a while. I feel like this is something that I should have mentioned a long time ago. It's taken me too long, but here it is. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe fucking sucks. It's a shitty book. It is. Look, here's the thing. Okay, how do I put this? It's not that it's... no, it's just terrible. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe... Okay, the Narnia as a series, Chronicles of Narnia, is... I can't speak for because I haven't read all the other books. Sounds interesting. So, if anyone listens to this with any sort of regularity, you'll remember. The reason I'm mentioning this now, I first mentioned it when I was oxygen deprived on the 5th episode. That was the band camp episode. But God knows, we couldn't hold a topic for more than 2 minutes on that. So I did not get around to really speaking my full opinions on it. But yeah, no. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, what I don't understand about it, it's not that the story is inherently bad. It's that it's treated like it's something that it's not. I just, all my life, it took me a really long time to read the book. Okay, and if I had read it, when as early as I had heard about it, maybe I would have a different opinion of it. But as it were, I had been hearing about the book as if it was, it was a classic book to read. And yeah, it was a children's book, but like Harry Potter is a children's book, okay? The Hobbit is a children's book. Lord of the Rings, not, I would say a child can read it, but, every fucking third grader was reading at a 5th, 6th grade level. So that doesn't mean shit. But like The Hobbit's a children's book, Percy Jackson's a children's book, Harry Potter is a children's book. And, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is it's a fucking I can read book. Like it's for 9 to 10-year-olds. Like Harry Potter is like you can start at 9 to 10 and read it until you can read it as an adult, but reading level wise, I could pick it up now and be like, this is an easy read, but it's still engaging. I pick up The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe, it's not engaging. And that's fine for what it is. If you read, again, that's like I feel like somehow I don't understand how this happened, but the mythos around it has been built up for it to be some like Tolkien universe, which it sounds like it is. I read about I've seen stuff about the other books, like summaries, and there's like this Prince Caspian shit, and then there's like it's like because this guy who wrote it totally was into world building. I get that, he had a whole thing with Narnia is just like one of the continents or something, and then there's a whole other thing where there's king that rules over this world of Narnia or whatever the fuck it is. They have geography and kingdoms and I assume more enemies. I haven't really heard anything about what the villains are, but point is the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is like the Hobbit to the rest of the Chronicles of Narnia. They're Lord of the Rings. And then that whole thing is scaled back, by several degrees of maturity, so that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is, grossly more simple than The Hobbit, and then the rest of Narnia is grossly more simple than Lord of the Rings. But they're relatively in like the same place. But again, I think I was just lied to, because I was given this impression that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and that the Chronicles of Narnia are this, again, classic story. And generally classic stories, even if they're for kids, are still, how do I put this? There's a quality that a story needs to have for it to, stand the test of time. And I feel like this doesn't stand much. It stands the test of time for 8-year-olds. I'm beating around the bush. Look, when you open the book, the foreword or whatever, at the start of it, the author tells you that it was written for his daughter or niece or granddaughter or something. Anyways, a little girl. It was written for a little girl, and he has this whole thing about girls grow faster than books. So it's a children's fairy tale is what it is. Even as far as children's fairy tales go, I don't know. I don't know if this deserved all the world building that was put into it. I mean, again, The Hobbit was, for Tolkien, like, children's nonsense that he then built off of into The Lord of the Rings. So I guess if that's what this guy was going for, then yeah, sure. But The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a bedtime story that you hear once that you could honestly make up on the spot. And there's no staying power to it. I'm never going to go back and read that book unless it's to my children. I'm never going to go back and read that and be like, yeah, this, even though it's a simple story, the message, lasts throughout time or something. There's something that we can still learn. It's not. There is no message. Not an interesting one anyways. Like good triumphs over evil, honor, and be a good person and stuff. And your mistakes are... So for those of you who don't know, have never read it or watched the movie that was made or even heard much about it, the general story is aren't they being sent away from the Nazis or something? I feel like a lot of stories kind of start with that. I might be thinking of Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. But anyways, 4 siblings, 2 sisters and 2 brothers are sent to like their uncle's house or something, and basically they're playing hide and seek, and this little girl finds the youngest little girl finds a wardrobe. That's the wardrobe that leads them to Narnia, this magical world. At some point, the other 3 discover it as well. The second youngest, who's a boy, meets this evil wicked witch of the north deal, and she takes him on her evil sleigh, and they go to Elsa's ice palace, and she gives him donuts, and then he becomes evil. And then he's overall just kind of a dick even before he gets turned evil, which I guess is the idea. He's he's the second person to see Narnia and like discover the wardrobe and whatever with the girl, and then after they get out, he's like pissed at her for whatever reason, so he just denies. He pretends like they were he pretends like they were playing a game when they went to Narnia. He's just he's overall just a real twat of a person. But yeah, then he just goes full on supervillain more or less because he's like, I don't know. There's it's something like this woman is. I feel like there's for some reason I feel sexual tension with this boy, even though he's like 11 and she's probably thousands of years old or something. But teach their own. Now here's where the plot really gets fired up though. So basically the other three, okay, it's a story about 4 siblings, but one of them is evil for most of it, or trapped in the evil palace. So the 3 good little boys and girls basically come to this magical world. First thing they meet is a faun. I prefer satyr, but whatever. It's the half goat, half man guy. Who? Yeah, Tumnus. Who says a lot of stupid things that I guess are supposed to be like jokes. And then he's a loser because he's too afraid of the Ice Queen or whatever to go against her. So he's like, you go meet these friends, they'll help you. Now here's the thing. Okay. I was just actually talking with William about one of Cartoon Network's weird things. I'm going off on a tangent here if you can't tell already. Cartoon Network, for those of you who watched it in the like middle time, okay, the 2000s, early 2010s, when it was not trash, but it wasn't its golden age anymore. They had a real thing for just weird, for creating worlds where things were just kind of whatever they wanted to be. So I'm talking about shows like specifically Adventure Time and Regular Show, and I really kind of liked this. It's not like Zootopia, Disney shit where everyone's an animal, everyone's a talking animal, or fucking whatever. I was gonna say like My Little Pony or something. That's still just animals, but specifically horses and dragons. I don't know. I never watched the show. Point is, it's not like all one thing. If you've ever watched them, Adventure Time, it's like that's the whole thing. Is Finn the human, Jake the dog, but Jake can, stretchy for whatever reason, and then there's Candy Kingdom, so everyone there's a candy, but then there's, the Ice King, who's just a guy as well, and then there's a vampire, and then there's a unicorn, and then there's a talking, calculator, and it's just whatever shit you can imagine, and I'm cool with that. And then Regular Shows that even more so, where it's like, you think it's, anthropomorphic animals having, as the title would suggest, a regular life. It's just a blue jay and a raccoon. First of all, already a very random selection of animals to be friends. But then, like, their boss is a gumball machine. And then there's Muscle Man is just a man. And then Skips is, I guess, a Yeti. Anyways, that's the whole... So that was the, bizarre Cartoon Network thing. For some reason, Narnia's like that too. So, like I just said, the first thing you meet in Narnia is a satyr, and then you meet an ice witch person, and so you're like, again, you're getting like Tolkien vibes. Okay, it's like Tolkien was like into Norse fantasy, but it's so like, okay, maybe this is a Roman version of that. You got goat people, maybe it's gonna be centaur and shit. Okay, that's cool. And then the second character you meet is a talking otter, and they're like full. They're not anthropomorphic, but they're full, walking on their hind legs, wearing fucking glasses and baking bread and shit. And it's just a family of otters, and they're just in a hole somewhere. Okay, there's no like society of otters. There's no village or whatever. It's just Tumnus the goat man lives here in this hole, and then he takes them to another hole a little ways away, and there's an otter, completely different stature, different height than the satyr, but they can just communicate and like it's totally normal. So these three kids meet the otter, and he takes them, on a secret whatever, and they're being chased by Ice Lady and whatever in her magic sleigh. And basically the idea is we need to take you to like the lion, okay? Aslan, the lion. He's our Lion King of the jungle, whatever. Hasn't been seen forever, but if he wakes up again, he'll show that witch who's boss or whatever. And I think there's probably a prophecy involved somewhere. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. And then, Santa Claus shows up and he gives them gifts, and Santa Claus is like, I haven't been here in a long time. Narnia has been without Christmas ever since that witch showed up or whatever, because even though she came and it's always winter, it's never Christmas. I didn't make any of that up. That all happens in the story. That's all real, and that's really the explanation is this witch person made it eternal winter. It's always winter, but never Christmas, and that is the worst thing that she could have done. Again, it's a story meant for a child, which is fine, but Jesus Christ, if they can copyright the Happy Birthday song, surely there's some copyright infringement just putting Santa Claus in your fucking story. And Santa Claus just exists among, the talking lion and talking otters and horse people and goat people. Oh, fuck, yeah, that makes it much better. Okay, yeah, beaver people. And now, okay, here's the best part is throughout this story, okay, then they meet the lion, and then they all get together. The boy finally comes back. He's like, ice person is not good, and then he runs away and probably tries to kill her or something, but obviously he fails. And then, like, the one monster comes, and then the oldest boy is like, I'm gonna fight him, and so he does, and he kills it, and then he forgets to wipe the blood off his sword, so Aslan just like beats the shit out of him, and it's like, never forget to wipe your sword off. And then Peter's like, okay, and then he does, and then the Ice Queen comes to fight them, and then there's a bunch of monsters and a bunch of animals and half animals and half people, and then they all fight, and then they kill some people, and then off screen, the bad kid, Edward, who's good now, is like, her wand is the source of her power, and she keeps turning people to stone. And he's like, the wand is the source of her power, so then they destroy the wand and then win. And that all happens, like, not while you're watching. I don't know. We're like watching the littlest girl who got her Santa present was, I should mention the oldest boy got a sword, the oldest girl got a bow, Edward got like a knife, and the little girl, I don't remember her name, like Lucy or Lily or something, she got a like healing potion, and she uses it on some guy who's turned to stone or whatever. Anyways, so they kill the Ice Witch, or turn her to stone or some shit, and then they win, and they all become kings and queens, because it is a monarchy. So actually, I would say there's a problem with the incest there, but again, it's a monarchy, so that works perfectly fine. But now this one little like country in Narnia has 2 kings and 2 queens. Sure, why not? And yeah, that's the end of the story. I mean, I cut out some things, but really nothing of importance. So that's the plot. And if you want to know what I'm getting at here, like, just go back and think about it. Again, I didn't actually gloss over anything. These are just events that happen. That's all Narnia is. Again, if you're like a 7 years old, I'm sure that's an engrossing story of how kids just like you were able to find a magical world, and they found cute talking animals, and there was a lion who was good and could talk, and there was Santa Claus, and there was a witch who was bad, and they ate desserts, and they all became kings and queens in the end. That's a great story, absolutely. Reading it now, for me, a year ago, as a 15-year-old, I'm reading, I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Because honestly, I don't know, and I don't really care because it doesn't matter that much. 4 kids found a secret place, and they basically followed a bunch of people who were already in the secret place before they ever got there. These people were just living their lives, but because these kids showed up, suddenly this lion guy awakes, and then all that they have to do is get taken by a family of beavers to the lion, and from there, everything's taken care of. They don't do jack shit, I'm telling you. The only thing any of them contribute. The oldest boy kills one monster, which the lion could have bitch slapped to the other side of Narnia, and Edward is like, the wand is the source of her power, which anyone could have figured out. That's all that those kids contribute, okay? The girl heals one person. I'm pretty sure it's her own family. I think the second oldest girl does nothing at all. In other words, first of all, 4 main characters, there's not enough time to develop them at all. Okay, the oldest girl is kind of, before they go to Narnia, the oldest girl is like, she has a few moments where it's like she's the mom of the group. The youngest girl is, I guess, arguably the protagonist, if you were going to name one, because she discovers Narnia and, is little, so she likes talking to animals. The young boy, is the only one with an actual arc because he's selfish and greedy at first and goes with a strange woman just because she gives him desserts, and then becomes good at the end, and doesn't really sacrifice himself, but I guess he proves himself pretty useful in battle despite having no training. That's another thing. There's no training montage, nothing at all. They give a sword to a teenage boy, like 14 years old, and he immediately can use it, but he doesn't know how to clean it, so Aslan's gonna kick the shit out of him for that. Anyways, and speaking of the oldest boy, again, that's his only character development. All he does is be old and be like, oh, you little thing, isn't it funny how you believe in magical worlds and things? And then they discover the magical world, and he's like, well, what do you know? And then he goes, gets a sword from Santa Claus, and then can kill things with it. That's all he does. Is he gets a sword and can kill things with it because he's the oldest one, so he can fight. That's all he does. The girl does nothing. I think she shoots one thing with her bow and arrow. I don't remember. None of these kids need to be there. It's like some prophecy shit. And the lion, as soon as he wakes up, can take care of everything on his own. He wipes out the fucking witch and all her monsters, just backhands the shit out of all of them with his lion paws, and beats the shit out of his own people, because they don't clean their swords, and then they win. That's it. They win. There's no moral. The kids don't learn anything. They just become kings and queens. Oh, and at the end, they discover the wardrobe again by accident on a hunting thing and go back and realize, oh yeah, shit, we have human lives, but it's magic, so no time has passed at all, even though they've literally grown up and become adults in Narnia, but back at home, they're still regular kids. So, great concept. You can spend as much time as you fucking want in Narnia and then come back in time for dinner. But so what did they accomplish? What are you supposed to get out of that? Again, it's fun to listen to if you're a very small child, but there's no substance to it for anyone who's read any other actual literature. So look, I have no problem with the story as it exists. It can be there. It's not offensive to me. It's the way people treat it like something that really gave me expectations of an entirely different thing. And it's not. It's a series of events that happen to these children. The children don't make any of it happen. They happen to the kids who are just along for the ride. It's entirely a matter of circumstance, luck and fate, and that's all. And then shit happens, and then they win. That's it. It's the whole story. So that was my Narnia thing. I mean, you do you, but God, don't tell me Narnia is something that it isn't anymore, please. I watched some of the movies, though. I watched the first one, and then I guess, I don't know how many movies they made. I watched the one where they're on a boat. Again, it's stuff that I think is interesting, because there's 4 main characters, and then there's a whole thing with, each book actually has a different amount of those 4 original characters. Like, again, how, The Hobbit is introduces Bilbo and all the dwarves, and then Gandalf. And then when the Lord of the Rings comes around, it's Bilbo's nephew Frodo and Sam, and a lot of new characters that are all kind of related. Pippin and Merry are all related to the family, the Baggins family. But and then Gandalf is back, but it's not the original dwarves. It's been quite a while. I think there's like one of the original dwarves, and then Legolas. If you've only watched the movies, Legolas was not in The Hobbit, but they go to like towns they were in The Hobbit, and then they meet that king of the. Anyways, there's recurring shit, and it's in the same world, and it's different amounts of characters who's in it, and they actually take that even further beyond. Like, again, I read short summaries of the other stories, and it gives you like names, just what characters are in it, and it's like the second book. There's like 5 or 6 or something. There's quite a few, and like one of them is a prequel. So really, this guy wrote this story for a little girl, and he was like, well, this did pretty well. I think we should keep going. And then he actually got into world building. So I'd be interested to read the rest of the books, but nobody gives a shit. But there's this whole thing of like the little girl is in the most. She's in like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something or whatever it is, and then like and then the youngest boy is in the third 3, 4, 5, 6 or whatever, and then the oldest girl is in 4, 5, 6, and then the boys in 5, or maybe it's just 5. Anyways, so they get progressively more until I think the last book is the only one that again has all 4 of them. Or something like that. It's not exact, but it's pretty much like that. The girl is in like all of them. The little boy is in most of them, and then the older girl and the oldest boy are just not in most of them, which kind of makes sense. Again, they don't do as much, but then I like the idea that in the last one they come, I'm pretty sure that, you know, it's like a big fight, and then so in the last one they got the older ones, and they're probably just going to beat the shit out of stuff. And they're adults, right? So again, I would be interested to read the other Narnia books. They're probably completely different. It's probably about adult kings and queens ruling over Narnia and beating the shit out of evil, which I think would be pretty cool. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is exactly what the title... I should have known, honestly, from the overtly descriptive title. It's like, they came up with, you know, it's almost as bad as the Goblet of Fire. There's a lion, there's a witch, there's a wardrobe. There's 4 kids, but you don't need to know that until you start reading the story. That's what the book is. It's Lion, Witch, Wardrobe, 4 kids. And then they took most of that and made it into the title, and they're like, 4 kids part. It doesn't sound as snappy. You know, the end. Thank you. Good. Go home. Good night. I don't know what purpose it serves to say this, but I've been wanting to say it since band camp, so now I have. There you go. And the other thing I wanted to talk about today is I need to defend the Imperial measurement system. And this is the perfect opportunity to, because there's no one who can interrupt me. Imperial measurement system is not bad. Neither is the metric system. Both are very useful and have their own uses and purposes. The hate for the Imperial system is something I don't understand. And this is the thing, even Americans are like, we use the Imperial, it's stupid. You know, and then of course the other end of the spectrum is just Imperial is better because America's best, and that's the only logic, which is also stupid. So once again, I'm fighting an uphill battle. But listen, the Imperial system, there's no reason to abolish it. Let me start by saying this. All I'm defending is the existence of both metric and Imperial. They both need to exist. We don't need to get rid of either of them. But the Imperial system, I feel, is grossly underappreciated for what it is, and the purpose that it serves. So listen, metric system is a great concept, and when I say metric, I don't know how many of these fall under metric. Like, I don't know if does Celsius fall under metric? I don't think it technically is, because I think metric and Imperial are systems of measuring, not mass, but hey, it's the summer. I've already forgotten everything I learned, all the physics and general science things. But like, it's quantities, I guess. Is temperature quantity? I don't know.
Well,
Celsius is part of metric. Okay, never mind then. Okay.
It wasn't originally when it was made. But
so they just added it to just because all the places that use metric use Celsius. Okay, fine, I can accept that. I don't need to know. Nandon would bring up a thing which was like, well, the reason metric works is because 1 centimeter is exactly the distance that it takes light to travel in this amount of time, or some shit like that. And I'm not making that up. That's exactly what he has said. And he's not wrong, but who gives a shit? Okay, I don't. That's not what matters. No. Metric works great because it's based on base 10. And yes, the world generally uses base 10. People have, made vouchers for base 12, base 6, or whatever, which are interesting ideas, but I think, base 10 works. It's what we have right now, and it's be very hard to change that. So the metric measurement system is based on a base 10 system, which is what we have, which makes it infinitely more practical and easy and applicable for math and science, for making measurements, for making, precise measurements, for measuring out amounts. If you're in the medical field, the engineering field, and honestly, construction, I would I would absolutely think that metric makes a lot of sense. Now, here's what's funny: construction uses imperial because I guess America is, even though they don't produce all the lumber in the world, they are the ones who end up selling it because whatever it gets manufactured, or it gets like cut down somewhere else, but ends up getting manufactured out of an American factory. So, just because the last place that the wood was in America, they are the ones who get to say how long the plank is, and that's measured in feet and yards and inches and shit. I mean, that's what we have. 2x4s are measured in inches, and whatever. That's the way they are. It's fine. But I'm actually okay. Look, Imperial haters, I'm on your side here. It would totally make sense for things like construction, which require lots. Being an architect or any of those jobs involved in construction are very mathematical, and so doing that kind of math, it would be helpful to use a metric system. Measuring out amounts of anything, doing measurements, or doing calculations on measurements, you're going to want to use the metric system. Yeah, I agree. It's a pain in the ass to be measuring out, and they don't do it. That's why. You have to measure out the fucking dosage of a life-saving, serum, to have to measure out the dosage of like morphine in ounces or something. No one's gonna do that. Absolutely not. No, millimeters. Yeah, or milliliters. Sorry, or cubic millimeters. I guess. No, cubic centimeters is a milliliter. Yeah. Anyways, so actually, that little mix-up I just had there, that's getting to my point. Why you can't use metric for everything. It's not a perfect system. Mathematically, it's very sound, but when you use it in day-to-day life, it's not meant to be used in day-to-day life. Guess what? The imperial system was. There's a reason why imperial came first, because mathematicians, believe it or not, mathematicians and scientists are not the first people to need to count and measure things. No, it's just average people who are like, yeah, no, the other day, man, I saw a mountain lion that was like this fucking big. It's like, how many? I don't know, like I could step across it, 5 times, 5 feet long, 5 foot mountain lion. I don't know if that's a reasonable measurement for a mountain lion at all. That it could stand up as tall as a human. I think that sounds about reasonable. See, I guesstimated that because feet make sense in my mind. Because you can literally imagine it that way.
6 to 8 feet.
Oh my god, I undersized it. Holy shit. Well, that's because they don't walk on their
females
hind
are 5 to 7.
Okay. Anyways, because I could imagine how many times could I step across a mountain lion. Not that I could ever accomplish that, but just picture a mountain lion skin rug or some shit. How the hell are you gonna measure that in centimeters? You're not. Maybe use meters. Okay, how big is a mountain lion in meters then? If it's 5, let's go with what I said, 5 feet, which is I guess the smallest possible size. It's a meter. Okay, it's a which I guess that works, but if it's then the 7-foot mountain lion, then how are you gonna measure it? It's a meter in what, 30 centimeters or something? No, that's 30 centimeters is a foot.
Nothing even comes up when I search it.
In meters? No.
How
Well, look up 7 feet to convert it to metric. Anyways, it's not practical. Okay, I've learned both systems having lived in America and Canada.
It's 2.1336 meters.
2 meters. Okay, so it's over 2 meters. Measuring the length. This is the easiest one to make. This is the easier argument to make because it's also the most commonly used. Is measuring just the length of things, right? Okay, you want to do that all the time, using inches and feet, and then you include yards and miles, I guess. Those are designed to be the measurements that would most commonly be used when you're measuring things in your life. We've gotten rid of some already. There was like hands, and there was chains and diblets and shit. And then we're like, we don't need all those, and that was part of the imperial system. We're like, okay, some of those are a little batshit crazy. We're gonna stick with the essential ones. An inch, 12 of those is a foot. 5,280 of those is wait, did I say a foot? Sorry. 3 of those is a yard. 5,280 of those is a mile. Those are the measurements that we need. That's all we need. Oh, and then football fields.
People have a problem with football fields.
With what, measuring things in football fields? That doesn't make any sense. It's one of the oldest imperial measurements that's been around. I don't know what we would do if we didn't measure things in football fields. What are you gonna replace it with? Fucking kilometers? Doesn't make any sense.
Also, inches are great.
They are. Okay, so here's my point in all seriousness. Centimeters are based on base 10, which is again great for doing calculations, but because it's an exponential set of numbers, it grows exponentially. So a centimeter times 10 is a decimeter, which for some reason people refuse to use. Can one of you fucking born-bred Canadians explain to me what's wrong with a decimeter? It's 10 centimeters. I don't see what's wrong with it. Why can't you? There's nothing wrong. Like, it's not off. That's the whole point of metric, is that every unit you have should be exactly what you need and work perfectly fine, because it's just 10 of the last thing. So you go 10 centimeters, you get a decimeter, you get 10 of those, you get a meter, 10 of those, you get... Anyways, so the distance from the most commonly used measurements for length, centimeter to meter, are ludicrous, because, again, for some reason you're using decimeters. Even if you use decimeters, a decimeter is 10 centimeters, but, what did I say? A decimeter is 10 centimeters, a meter is 100 centimeters. 100 centimeters for a meter? What are you going to measure? What are you going to measure between those? If you use decimeters, I could see an argument for it, but people refuse to use decimeters. So look at it this way. The two smallest commonly used measurements of length in the metric system are the centimeter. Well, okay, you could count millimeter, but again, you don't measure most shit in millimeters. If you need to measure something in millimeters, you use millimeters. I can totally see that in any application, right? Like the width of a fingernail, the width of, when you're talking about the width of like fangs on things, you know? People will go, oh, the fangs are on this snake or on this species of spider are enormous, but they're going to measure in millimeters, because enormous doesn't mean it's a foot fucking long, right? But again, I'm talking about day-to-day usage, okay? You're never going to be able to eye up the length of a snake's tooth. Well, actually, no, you'd probably be like, it's like an inch. That would be huge. That would be enormous for a snake. You're never going to be able to look at a snake. First of all, you're not going to have enough time if a snake is showing its teeth to measure them. But even if it was, dead, you were pulling its mouth open, you're not going to eye that up. You're going to measure it, and then you're going to measure in millimeters. I'm totally fine with that. But if you're just looking at something and measuring it, if you're using metric system, you're not going to use millimeters either. Unless for some reason you're observing, the width of someone's eyes or their fingernails. You're going to be using centimeters or meters. And in the Imperial system, you're going to be using inches and feet. Inches. Okay, so centimeters are smaller than inches, and meters are larger than feet. 3 times as large, as a matter of fact. So that means that when it comes to measuring things, you want to be in the middle ground. You want to be the moderate. So imperial measurements are in between those two enormously different extremes, which means there's an enormous range of things that you see in your day-to-day life that you could either measure with a few feet or a few inches, or very many centimeters or very few meters, which just makes it awkward. Because you get to a point where it's like, this thing is, it's not quite close enough to a meter that you could round up. It's not like 980 centimeters. It's like 827 centimeters. So I don't really want to round that up to a meter. But also, who the fuck wants to say 827 centimeters? What a fucking mouthful. Whereas you could just say, 2.5 feet. I don't know what 827 centimeters would be. Speaking of, right, feet aren't even the equivalent measurement to meters, right? The closest would be yards, which yards are, I believe, exactly 3 feet, and then meters are a little bit bigger than a yard, so you can say it's roughly 3 feet, right? When you get a meter stick, like the inch side, it's 3 feet and then like a couple inches, and then it's a meter. Or if you get a yardstick, it's exactly 3 feet, and the metric side will be whatever. So the things you would measure in yards, you could also measure in meters. How much shit do you measure in yards? Almost nothing. Yards are probably the least useful imperial length measurement, and that's what metric uses all the time for everything, is fucking meters. So, and then even that aside, if we say meters and yards are useful for their own thing, because they're, okay, admittedly, there's plenty of things measured in yards, viewable distances. Like, from here to that tree. You're not going to measure that in feet or centimeters. God knows. You're going to measure in meters or yards. Even taking that into account, if you go, okay, you got centimeters to inches. So centimeters are honestly a little too small to be practical. You know, I have no clue just looking at my laptop screen. You know, that's probably no, fuck it. It's 1 foot and 3 inches. That's what I'm gonna guess. Okay. No. It's like 1 foot. Okay. Yeah, my computer screen. Let's say it's about 1 foot across. If I were to fucking measure that in centimeters, God knows I'm not gonna say it's a third of a meter. If I were to say that in centimeters, I'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, I don't know what the fuck is a foot in centimeters. 30 centimeters. I know that because I know the conversion, but I would never look at this and be like, I don't know. It's like, maybe if I was using decimeters, I could pretty easily go 3 decimeters. But again, you refuse to use decimeters. What is the deal? Explain to me why people hate decimeters. It's your job, please. Because I just don't understand the hate for the decimeter. So if you use decimeter, which is 10 centimeters, and a foot is 30 centimeters, so you're closer then. So then the decimeter would equal the foot. But a decimeter is still a third the size of a foot. So things that you're going to normally measure with feet would be 3 times as many decimeters. And 3 times as many decimeters is still only a third of a meter. So something that you would measure as about a foot would be 3 decimeters, which is fine. You would not want to measure that in centimeters, 30 centimeters, I guess. And you would definitely not want to measure that as a third of a meter. Or you can measure it as 1 foot. 2 feet for 6 decimeters. That still seems reasonable. You're not going to measure 60 centimeters, and you're not going to say 2/3 of a meter. You could just say 2 feet. Everything in between a centimeter and a meter is better measured with Imperial. It just is. It just makes more sense. The things that you measure in your day-to-day life. Your bed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet across. 5.5 feet across. Or wide. Across, 8 feet. Your paper, 11 by 8 by 11 inches? What's the standard size for paper? I don't know it in centimeters. I definitely don't know it in meters. So the decimeter is a lot more useful, but you see how even if you use centimeter, decimeter, meter, and compare that to inch, foot, yard, you would have centimeter smaller than an inch, decimeter smaller than a third the size of a foot, and then meter almost the same size as a yard. So you see the problem there? The biggest of the 3 measurements I'm giving, the biggest unit is about the same, roughly the same size. The smallest unit, or the medium-sized unit for Imperial is a third of that. But the medium-sized unit for metric is a third of the medium size for Imperial. And that's because of this exponential system I'm talking about. Even if you're using decimeters to make that middle ground, which are already 10 times the size of centimeters, you would need to go 10 times that to get a meter. So it's an exponential growth. If you look at a graph of the size of a centimeter compared to a decimeter compared to a meter, the meter is way fucking bigger relatively to the centimeter and decimeter. Centimeter and decimeter are like buddies, and then the meter is just a fucking gargantuan. Whereas if you go inch to foot to yard, it's like they're all buddies. Foot is actually closer to a yard because 3 feet is a yard and 12 inches is a foot. But like there's no multiples of 10 there. You multiply an inch by 12, you get a foot. You multiply a foot by 3, that's 12 times 3. That's still just 36 inches in a yard. Is that right? 36 inches in a yard? Like, holy shit, I can count that out. I could measure something as 36 inches. Remember the example I gave before? If you want to measure something as 1 foot in centimeters,
6 inches in a yard.
If I was going to go like, this thing is about a foot, but I was insisting on using the metric, I would have to go, this thing is about 30 centimeters, which is doable. Or I could go something that is a yard. I could go, this is more than 30 inches. Think about that. If you can eyeball 30 centimeters, then you can eyeball 30 inches. Except if you eyeball 30 centimeters, the only distance you're accomplishing is a foot. If you wanted to eyeball size something twice that size, you'd have to double that. If you double that, it would still be smaller than just eyeballing 30 inches, which is, just under a yard. Whereas 2 sets of 30 centimeters, 2 feet, is only 2/3 of a yard. Does this make any sense to you? Okay. Like, if you're fucking if you're an Imperial hater and a metric circle jerker, then you probably aren't understanding this, you smooth brain. But if you have an ounce of reason in you, you have to see it. Imperial measuring just is meant to be used in day-to-day life. Okay. Now, volume. I don't measure volume very often. Okay. You usually don't measure volume in your day-to-day life. Times when a regular person, so in this case, I'm going to say, in most applications, metric is more useful because most of the time you're measuring volume, it's for precision measurements involved in math and science. Okay, because volume is a pretty sophisticated, I guess you could just look at it as it's, length but to the third dimension. That fact alone already makes it a lot, because you can't eyeball volume. You can eyeball the length and the width and then and the depth and then try and multiply that together. But who's going to do that shit in their head? The only thing is drink containers, I would say. Like, as an average person, you might need to know the volume of, a swimming pool you're inserting. But you hire professionals to do that, right? And then you might have and I don't even know all the measurements in metric or Imperial. I will admit, again, metric is much easier to figure out when it comes to volume. But the only time you would use volume, if you were to use volume every single day, like if someone told you have to measure something in volume or you have to use a measurement of volume every single day for like a month, you would be using drink containers. You would not be measuring the volume of cubes and of swimming pools. You'd be going, I drank a liter of Mountain Dew today, or this 2-liter bottle of Coke, a liter of milk, and all of those liters, that's the Imperial, or sorry, that's the metric. That makes sense. I understand that. But when you're in America, you don't want to drink a liter of milk. You want to drink a gallon of milk at a time. Okay, you want a gallon of milk. I mentioned swimming pools. I honestly don't know what the largest, typically used measurement of volume is. Like, what would you measure the volume of a swimming pool in? Because if gallon and liter are the biggest, then you're going to want to use gallons because gallons are bigger than liters. In which case, Imperial actually wins out there because, I don't think volume measurements get that big because, you don't need to measure the volume of a house. You measure it in, floor space, so square feet, because square meters or square centimeters would be retarded. You see what I'm saying? You could measure your house in square decimeters, but you refuse to. So your house is measured in square feet. Don't care where you're from. You know why your house can be measured in square feet, even though most countries in the world use metric on a daily basis? Because Imperial came first. So if you're measuring out drinks, you might have a pint glass. You might have ounce cups. Are cups in like teaspoons and shit? That's only used in like cooking. Are those part of Imperial or metric? Are those part of those measurement systems? Well, that's what you're here for. You haven't given me any answers. You've been typing away furiously.
I'm trying to figure out why people don't use decimeters.
Okay.
I haven't gotten any answers.
That's okay. Get back to
are.
that. Oh my shit. It's
the only
really
answers
obvious.
I found are people who are American are like, I think we just don't use it because we don't use metric.
Yeah, no fucking shit. Man. You need to go on Reddit Canada. Reddit.ca. Anyways.
Cups are... A cup is not metric or Imperial.
Okay, so I thought it's
Kelvin.
No, it's part of the cooking metric. The cooking meter. The cooking system. Anyways. Yeah, so forget those, but in American or in Imperial volume measurements, I think ounce is probably the smallest typical, right? And I think it's 6 ounces to a pint, or 4 quarts to an ounce. Is an ounce bigger than a quart? I think a quart is pretty big. I think it's 8 ounces to a quart, 4 quarts to a pint. and a bunch of pints to a gallon. Look it up. I bet I'm right. But again, I've never used any of those measurements. The only volume measurements I've ever used, because I don't do cooking and I don't measure out my drinks, so the only thing I've ever seen is, liter bottle of soda, liter bottle of, or a liter carton of milk, so that's fine. So yeah, there I would say use whatever you want. There's no reason to separate metric and imperial. Unless you're doing math and science, then yes, use metric, because then you're using milliliters, because it's very small amounts of things. But okay, here, give me again. I was just talking about all those imperial things, right? And they're very complicated. I agree. I mean, quarts make sense because it's a quart. It's like a quarter. That makes just as much sense as quarters in currency. I wish measurements should all honestly be like that. Where I get a foot, the idea is that it's about the size of the foot, but if you could name it, a dodeca something, dodekian, I don't know, something that means 12, I would very much appreciate it. But we have what we got. But yeah, no, like ounce to quart to liter to gallon, none of those to pint, none of those words mean anything, so I can see how it's confusing. Again, metric users will claim the superiority here. The advantage is liter. A milliliter, it's very obvious to tell because the Latin is it's 1,000th of a liter. But what about all the things that aren't a liter or a milliliter? I know. Most of the time, it's like if you're measuring shit in like chemistry, you're not going to be using more than a few milliliters because a little goes a long way. And if you're measuring drinks, yeah, a carton of milk, a bottle of soda, it's all going to be a liter or more, multiples of a liter. But like, how much does your cup hold? Huh? You don't ever measure that. I know I don't. But in America, you can. We have pint glasses. We have ounce cups. You can't have a third of a liter glass or whatever. It doesn't exist. But why doesn't it exist? Metric is supposed to be so perfect, and I agree to all the reasons why it is good. I don't agree that makes it better than imperial, but I do agree that all these things make it good. The base 10 thing. So where is the base 10? Why do you have to go from milliliters to liters? Where are the centiliters? Where are the deciliters? Where are the decaliters? If you need it to go that high. Because again, I'm pretty sure gallon is significantly larger than a liter. Why don't you use those? You have them. I can only fathom the reason being anyone who, because this is more proof, by the way, that our world is entirely owned by businesses, okay? Don't think that you or politics or society get to make any decisions. It's businesses that make the decisions. So seriously though, this is what capitalism does, right? It's little things, but it's the little things that shape the way that your mind fucking works. The only reason why like I just said before, all your wooden boards are measured in inches is because they all come out of America, even though, 90%, 98% of the fucking world uses metric. They come out of America, so they're measured in imperial. You have things measured in liters in Canada, but if you wanted to measure, if there was no imperial system, I'm sure it would be at least slightly more common for people to say, yeah, like a centiliter of this shit, a deciliter of whatever of beer, right? Because you're not drinking a liter of beer. You're not. You're drinking a pint, however much that equates to in metric. So the only reason that we don't use those things, we don't actually use the metric system to the fullest of its ability, is because imperial exists. And you might think that's a bad thing. Imperial, stole the usefulness of metric, but I think it's a good thing because I'm sure the imperial system would cover more bases than if we were using metric, because if we did have such things as centiliters and deciliters, the gap between those, it would get despairingly larger to the point where, the distance between a deciliter and a liter is way bigger than the distance between a deciliter and even a milliliter, not to mention a centiliter. But none of that matters because none of those measurements exist. I've never heard anyone other than myself say the word centiliter or deciliter. It's like metric people are afraid of those things. It's like, I don't know. It's such a weird, bizarre thing. So many things, though, that most people have accepted as normal are just weird to me. Language, so much language is weird. So many rules and laws and things that are systems that are set up or establishments that are set up in obviously flawed ways where I go, I'm not smart. There's no way I'm the only person to think of this solution. But maybe I am. I don't know. There's so many things that just have such simple flaws, and the reasons are obviously complex. It's not like somehow they got a person who is more stupid than I am. I just use the term more stupid, okay? To set up things like the English language. No, the people who invented it are a lot smarter than I am. But they were, had their the language that they created was layered off of lots of other languages that had maybe very small and unnoticeable flaws. And then years later, there was more languages with also small flaws layered onto that. And then, English got its own flaws. And so those flaws mixed with other languages who had also had years of development and developing their own flaws, or just changes. Maybe it was an intentional change in the language for the better, but it gets misincorporated into English, and then it becomes a flaw instead. And so then you end up with one very flawed language. And that's history. That's what history is. It's just all the little flaws adding up together to present day. That's why the future is always so much shittier than the past. So I don't understand those problems, but at the same time, I realize there's a reason why they're there. Measurement is so bizarre to me. I will never understand, unless someone explains to me in plain, simple English, why metric doesn't get used. Why so many metric measurements in between ones that are more commonly used don't get used. And I'm sure the reason for most of them is just not useful, not practical or useful enough to have it. But there's almost always an imperial measurement for it, so clearly there's enough use for it. And what I'm saying is, if it were the other way, I would understand it. If people use metric most of the time, people do use metric most of the time. If metric was the one that was used for day-to-day life but was still like base 10, and then imperial, it was like, hey, how come in imperial you only use ounces and gallons? There's a huge difference between those two. Why don't you have something in between? And it's like, we just don't really measure anything in between those. Like, what are you going to measure a glass? Like, well, what if I want to drink an amount of beer that's between an ounce and a gallon? It's like, I just call that a few deciliters. But I almost never say that, and that's the only time I would ever use that term, so there's just really no point. In inventing something in the imperial measurement system, which is all invented quantities, right? That's people's, like, Nandans, that's their problem with imperial, is like, it's just made up quantities that have no scientific definition. Which, yeah, okay, you got a point there, but that's not how it is. It's because the scenario isn't that. It's flipped from that. Yeah, I could understand if you were like, I'm not going to invent a unit of measurement just so I can measure out an amount of beer. But in metric, you already have those. You don't have to invent anything. That's why you say it's so great, is because they all exist. All you needed was centimeter. I don't know why you start with centimeter. It's a little weird to me, but I guess it makes sense. You wouldn't want to just keep building and building, right? You want to go, they give room for lower and higher. Like, you can go from meter to kilometer. You can go from meter down to centimeter or millimeter. I understand that, but it's just weird to say the base is centimeter when the base word is meter. So anyways, but you start with centimeter. You start with liter. You start with, Celsius is temperature is a different thing. I'm getting to that. And then from there, you just multiply by 10, multiply by 10, multiply by 10. Those things already existed because the multiples of 10 already existed. In imperial, it's true. They're all made up bullshit, but they're made up to be what you need in that situation. So, some guy was getting drunk off his ass and was like, I wonder how much of this beer I've drunk. And he was like, probably like, 1,000,000 ounces. Well, that makes no sense. 2 gallons. Okay, well, that's not interesting. Or like, less than a gallon. So who cares? Who wants to know what it was less than, right? Oh, I know. I drank 2 pints. And then they invented pints. And then there's pints of beer. And, yeah, you only use it for that. The only time I've ever heard pint used is when you're talking about beer. But guess what? You know what? Alcohol is a big enough part of Western civilization that it gets to have its own unit of measurement. Why the fuck not? No, I would not say, if I went back in time, I would not say, let's invent the pint just so we can measure beer. But I will say, why don't you use the already existing measurements in metric? You don't have to invent the pint. You just have to say the word centiliter or deciliter. That's what I mean. People, it's like they're afraid of the word centiliter and deciliter or decimeter. They're afraid. They refuse to say it. I've never heard a Canadian person say those, or any person say those words intentionally. And the Americans never say it because they never bother learning the metric system, so they don't even know that they exist. They don't know that those are out there. Why are we hiding the truth from people? Don't stop trying to cover up the existence of decis and centiliters. How about the fucking... How about 100 meters? What's 100 meters? Because centa is a hundredth, so what's 100? From 1,000, you go from milli to kilo, which is completely different. And from 10, you go from deci to deca. That makes sense. How do you go from centi to what? Centa? Centimeter? That would be too complicated. Is that why we don't use centimeters? Because it sounds too similar to centimeters? Is that the problem? Is that why? What about 10 meters? Decameters. Do we have decameters? Why don't we use decameters? What if I want to measure 10 meters? Why do we go right from 1 meter to 1,000 of them? What about all the things in between those? Those are the things you measure in football fields. It makes no sense. Actually, kilometers are significantly smaller than miles. Do you think a kilometer is about a football field? Is that their football field is kilometers? How big is a kilometer to a football field? I have no idea. When things get big, my brain don't do it. I'm not a smart person. I see things with reason, not math and science. Not like I cannot measure things out in my head. And I mean any kind of measurement. I mentioned this before.
Kilometer is 10.93613 football fields.
You don't need to give me that shit. Just keep 10, so 11 football fields.
Sure.
So a kilometer is 11 football fields. You see what I mean? 11 football fields. 10 football fields. So a tenth of a kilometer is a football field. What's a tenth of a kilometer in metric? A centimeter, whatever the hell 100 meters is. Use the 100 meters, then you can stop complaining about the football field measurement. That's why Imperial has the football field measurement, because it's a tenth of a kilometer. What would you do? If we go from yards to miles, that's too big of a jump. Some things need to be measured in football fields. Okay, that's just a fact. And some things need to be measured as less than a kilometer, because a mile is even bigger than a kilometer. Some things need to be measured as less than a kilometer, but more than a meter. That's a fact. There are things in the universe. You have it. Centa, deca, whatever the fuck Latin prefix you want. Use them. Aside from that, I talked about volume, talked about distance. I want to do something else before I get to temperature. What was it? What else do we have? What other measurements are there? Volume, length, and temperature. There's
second dimension. Area.
No. You could measure
things.
Things.
3 dimensions.
Yeah, well, what's the temperature dimension one? That's not how this works.
That's the 7th.
No, there's another.
Because the 4th dimension is time and the 5th dimension is love.
That's true, and the 6th dimension is whatever they did in that cartoon where they made the roller coaster in 6D. Remember that?
Yeah.
So the 7th dimension is temperature. Okay,
I think 5th dimension is actually bubbles, but
No, the 5th dimension is definitely love. If you haven't watched Interstellar. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure that was also the plot of Harry Potter. The 5th dimension is love, because they had a time turner.
Wasn't
that was 4th dimension. What? Inkheart is a totally different thing. Interesting concept, not very engaging books. That's besides the point. I feel like I'm not finished, but screw it. We're going on to temperature. Listen, y'all. you gotta understand. I don't give a fucking rat's ass what combination of salt and water your temperature is based off of. Yes, when you're cooking and you need to boil water, it's pretty handy to know. Well, okay, let me put it this way. It's interesting to know exactly 100 degrees Celsius is the point at which water boils. Don't get me wrong, I'm not mocking you if you're doing this for scientific reasons. That's super useful to know. Absolutely. Celsius or, Kelvin if you want to go real basic, use to measure things for science. That has so many applications. When you're looking at chemistry and then that being applied to biology, the melting points of substances should absolutely be measured in Celsius, no doubt, because then it can be easily compared to water. Or, the whole point of Kelvin, you can compare shit to absolute zero. You can compare it to literally how far the atoms in it are from being not moving. That was a really weird way to say that. My point is, temperature is just the measurement of atoms moving. 0 degrees Kelvin, absolute zero, means no movement. So, yeah, if you really want to get scientific about it, measuring in Kelvin is a degree of measuring how much an atom is moving inside of a substance. How much more it is than nothing, than still. It still makes no sense, but you know what I mean. If you're a high school student, you know what I'm talking about. So, who the fuck is goes out on a sunny day and is like, I'm pretty sure the atoms are moving a substantial amount right now. We're about 3,000 degrees over no movement. No one does that. You go outside and, all right, I'm gonna drop a fucking bomb on y'all in a second, but I'm not gonna get there yet. Let's talk more about Celsius. So yeah, the thing about Celsius is at 0 degrees water freezes, at 100 degrees water boils. This is great to know in ecosystems. Water, if substances have a higher lower boiling point than water, higher lower freezing point than water, what does that mean for an ecosystem if the water is freezing? That's actually fascinating shit about why water is the thing that you learn is why water is the way it is, but then you apply that to the fact that, oh yeah, water floats. Water is lighter when it's solid, which it normally isn't. And that's a temperature thing, and that is measured in Celsius. Absolutely. Why would you measure that in anything other than Celsius? But that's more than just temperature. You're also talking about the chemistry of that, because you have to understand why it's weird that water as a solid is, less dense than water as a liquid. Because if you don't know chemistry, then you're not thinking like, oh, solids are normally denser than liquids. You wouldn't think that. Because let's be honest, if you're talking completely practically, in day-to-day life, you don't need to know that liquids are normally less dense than solids. I don't see how that would help you unless it's for a scientific reason. So, if you're not thinking about that, then who gives a fucking shit why water, what exactly do temperature water freezes at? You go outside, you say, it's freezing out here. And if you see ice forming, then you're right. It's freezing or below. So, here's my other point. Boiling water when you're cooking. I was going to say it's useful, but then I changed to it's interesting. Because, yeah, it's kind of interesting to put your pot on and be like, once this hits 100, if I set this to exactly 100 degrees Celsius, once my stovetop reaches 100 degrees Celsius, my water will boil. Or you use a Fahrenheit oven, which is how all ovens are, by the way, in Fahrenheit, and you just crank that knob way the fuck up, and you wait till your kettle starts screaming, your teapot shouts, tip it over, and pour her the fuck out, because that's when she boils. When she bubbles, when she steams, she's boiling. That's all you need to know. Just watch it. Although a watch pot never boils. Turn away, and then once it starts to make noise, look back. If it's bubbling, it's boiling. You don't need to know if it's 100 or 101 or 114 fucking degrees Celsius. Who gives a shit? I don't know how hot that is in Fahrenheit. I don't need to. The instructions tell you everything you know. Preheat the oven to whatever the fuck it says to and put it in there. Put that fucking roast in there and turn the knob to whatever it says, okay? If it says to turn it all the way to the end. I'm turning it all the way to the end. I don't need to know if that's 300 degrees Celsius or 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't give a shit. Fahrenheit, of all the imperial measurements, is the one where I will absolutely put my foot down and die on this hill. It is more useful in everyday life in every way to Celsius. And here's why. Listen to this. Nobody gives a flying rat Jesus fuck that 0 degrees Fahrenheit is measured from the temperature that shale water or some shit, whatever, salt and water, some mixture of salt and water freezes. I don't care. You don't care. Nobody cares that 0 degrees Fahrenheit is the temperature at which water and salt freezes. The reason it's based off of that is just so that you had a base point to get to. But in day-to-day application, guess what Fahrenheit means? It goes from 0 to 100, which means the purpose of Fahrenheit is so that you can have a temperature measuring system that goes from 0 to 100, in which is a range in which human beings can survive. 0 to 100 is a survivable temperature range in Fahrenheit. That's what Fahrenheit is. Okay? That's how things work in the human world. We go from 0 to 100. You don't go negative. You don't go negative temperatures. In nature, yes, negative temperatures in Celsius works because negative means below freezing, and that means things in the wild, in nature. This place has a temperature of below freezing. What does that mean for the world? Well, that means there's no liquid water here. I wonder what kind of repercussions that's going to have on the ecosystem. Probably a lot. But when you're going about your day, the world, there's no purpose served by your world being negative. Anything in terms of temperature. 100 degrees Fahrenheit is really, really hot, and 0 degrees Fahrenheit is really, really cold. It's not perfect, because if it was perfect, then 50 degrees Fahrenheit would be like the ideal temperature, right? In reality, it's more like 60 to 70. I would say 60 is comfortable. Like 60, 65 is what we consider to be the amazing, beautiful Calgary summer temperatures. Guess what we call it when you're in Calgary? It's 22 degrees Celsius. Wow, we've hit 22, guys. Isn't it exciting? Get out the fucking fireworks. Let's have a parade in honor of 22, the number 22, whereas it could be 0. 0 to 22, the fuck kind of range is that? Or if you want to go the full range of Calgary weather, like let's say the absolute worst temperatures that you get on average, like negative 30 to positive 30. That's like the coldest to the hottest. That's 60 fucking degrees. Your temperature system has a range of 60 degrees. And that's in a city which is known for having a wide range of temperatures. Fahrenheit, you can go from 0 to 100. Most single areas don't go from 0 to 100. But the universe, the planet Earth, as a place where we live, can go from 0 to 100. And we can survive all of it. And we're most comfortable right in the middle. That's what Fahrenheit is for. That's the purpose it serves. Is so you can go outside on a day and go, I'm about 30% cold. It's probably around 30 degrees. I'm 80% hot. It's probably around 80 degrees. I'm really, really hot. It's probably about 100 degrees. That's what it's for. When you measure a fever, it's 100. Who wants to be like, oh my God, I'm burning up. Doctor, I think I'm dying. How hot are you? I'm 50. Holy shit, that's insane. If you're in Celsius, 50. Stop the presses. You're dying. You're dead. 50, you're dead. You're already dead. If you're 50, you're a heat source. You're a microwave oven. You can cook shit on you if you're 50. Why? You can't survive 100 degrees Celsius. You can't even survive 90 degrees Celsius. You can't survive negative 100. What's the metric? The metric is water. Makes perfect sense from a scientific standpoint. No sense from a human standpoint. We're not robots. When we inevitably get replaced by robots or bioorganic or biomechanical organisms, then they will all switch over to metric and be totally fine with it. They will look around their world and they will, they will do a little scan and they'll go, beep, 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 it is exactly 37.6 centimeters, this thing that I'm holding in my hand. Okay? But we look at it and we go, it's like a foot. It's like a foot and an inch, foot and 2 inches. Ain't that a bitch?